chaos standing till these native lands are back in native hands.
I wanted to share that we are on
This drum
Churchinho, a lonely land that has been occupied for many years now. If people can take a moment as we're waiting for the prayer to just imagine what these lands looked like before the colonizers arrived. The abundance of wildlife and plants and clean water, and just how beautiful things were when you had over 500 native languages in California.
I just give gratitude. Give gratitude to waking up this morning. Give gratitude to the first day of winter. Give gratitude for the rain that we've had these last couple of days. Give gratitude for the presence of all of us here. Where we heard the message and the call to action. To stand up with one another, to learn with one another, to hear the stories and to share our stories of the harms that are being done to our Mother Earth, the harms that are being done to our air, to our water, to our soil, to our ancestors, and to those yet to come. That includes our non-human relatives. Thank you.
This is Mama Nature calling all of us to slow down. Listen to the rhythm of the way we used to sound. This is Mama Nature calling all of us to slow down. Listen to the rhythm of the way we used to sound. This is Mama Nature calling all of us to slow down.
And it was such a beautiful day, and the sun came through the clouds, and it's one of those days where you feel like this is what Richmond should be, right? But as we looked up at the horizon, what we saw were billowing piles of smoke coming from the port, coming from the steel factory, and coming from Chevron. Smoke in the air, completely devastating the beautiful morning that we were trying to breathe in, and knowing that we're actually breathing in all the chemicals from all this smoke. And as I was doing this running and exercising, trying to do everything I can to take care of my body so that I don't get sicker, I was thinking, how can I resist that, you know? How can we resist that? What has that been doing to my body for these 47 years? 47 years of breathing in, breathing out these toxic chemicals. When we talk about fence-line communities, I think sometimes people forget that it's not just that you just live there, like you just moved there and it was like, you know, you don't like them, they're not good in general, but it's the amount of time, the amount of exposure, the amount that all of those chemicals are actually being incorporated into our bodies. There is no separation from the cells in our bodies and the cells outside. We're all one planet working together. So all of these years, you know, we become what they expel, like quite literally into our bodies. That's what it means when we talk about fence line communities, is that we carry those poisons. We pass those poisons on to our children that then are raised in these communities, and then they carry those poisons. And I think about, you know, how in the church community that I grew up in here in South Richmond, over 24 elders lost their lives to cancers. You know, not one cancer usually, but it would start with one cancer, like breast cancer, And then it was colon cancer. And now it's blood cancer. 3 of my aunts dead from cancers. My grandfather, who was the leader of our church, battled 3 cancers at once. What is that? Is that normal? In one community that lived in one neighborhood here in Richmond for over 50 years, multiple cancers, over 24 in the same small church? Is that normal? Or are we carrying a burden so they can make profits?
I'm here representing Amazon Watch. My name is Paul Pasimino. I'm the Associate Director. And I've worked with Amazon Watch since 2007, overseeing our Clean Up Ecuador campaign and challenging Chevron every day of the week. I wake up thinking about them or go to sleep thinking about them, unfortunately, because of the destruction that they've caused. I want to read to you a quote from an ally of ours in the Amazon, Nemo Andiquiquita of the Guarani indigenous people in Ecuador. She recently said, "Oil drilling in our Amazon has brought contamination, disease, deforestation, destruction of our cultures, and the colonization of our territories. It is an existential threat for us and violates our fundamental rights as indigenous peoples. We are calling for an end to all new extraction on our lands, and as our ancestors and science now affirm, we must keep fossil fuels in the ground in accordance with the commitments of the Paris Agreement and at COP26 in Glasgow." Amazon Watch recently put out a report with Stand.Earth detailing that the majority of the crude oil that is currently extracted from the Western Amazon, from Ecuador and Peru, mostly on indigenous territory, is coming to California. California is the #1 refiner of Amazon crude. And of that crude, almost 20% of it is refined here and at Chevron's other refineries in California. So I'm going to talk to you about the historical destruction in the Amazon, but it's important to remember that every single day, this corporation is profiting off of the death and destruction of the Amazon and indigenous peoples as it refines crude coming from the region and continues to buy it and sell it. And when you go to fill up at Costco, 1 out of every 7 gallons that you put in your tank is coming from the Amazon. Amazon.com, other large corporations in California, they're all using a huge portion of crude extracted from the Amazon and refined by Chevron and other refineries in California, and this must stop. We cannot let the continued destruction of indigenous peoples and the Amazon rainforest go on. We cannot allow our state to permit the importation of this crude oil, and we cannot permit criminal enterprises like Chevron to continue to profit off of the destruction of people and planet. Because at every point, it is harming our environment and our communities, up to the point, of course, here when it is refined and burned. And nobody knows that better than the people of Richmond. But this is not just a criminal enterprise that's refining destructive crude that's destroying our futures. This is a company with a legacy of destruction that is unparalleled in its industry. Chevron was the first oil company to drill for oil in the Amazon. In 1964, it went down under its Texaco brand, and it deliberately polluted over the course of decades, dumping hundreds of billions of gallons of toxic oil waste into the Ecuadorian Amazon. It actually admitted to deliberately dumping 16 billion gallons of toxic waste. That is many times more than even the Deepwater Horizon spill or the Exxon Valdez spill. And this was done systematically and intentionally over the course of decades, poisoning the drinking water of 30,000 people and destroying the northern Ecuadorian Amazon, and worse, even setting a precedent that has continued throughout the region. Every day, somewhere in the Amazon, there is another oil spill from a leaky pipeline or shoddy construction or operation of oil drilling. Every day, indigenous peoples and the environment are poisoned because of it. And Chevron then decided that the destruction of the Amazon wasn't enough. It was going to go further and deny access to justice to the indigenous peoples that it harmed and their advocates. And what I'm sure many of you know, Chevron was found liable for $9.5 billion almost exactly 11 years ago, in an Ecuadorian judgment that found that it had deliberately polluted. But rather than pay the judgment and clean up what it had already admitted to doing intentionally, it countersued the indigenous people and their lawyers in New York under a law that was created to go after the mafia. They used that law to target their lawyers, the Ecuadorian people, their allies, Amazon Watch, bloggers, investors, people that were pushing the company to clean up. And then they literally criminalized the lawyer who helped win that $9.5 billion judgment, Steve Donziger. And Stephen is an example of what happens when we are successful in challenging the fossil fuel industry. And the chilling example is that the US government will be complicit in the silencing of activists and lawyers. Chevron's firm, Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, their principal law firm, one of 60 law firms that they hired to fight back against Ecuadorians and their advocates, they came up with what is called the kill step strategy. It is a method by which they will try to invalidate foreign judgments in the United States. They went to a racist, corrupt, former tobacco industry judge in New York, and they got him to take their case and criminalize Steve Donziger, who was recently thrown into jail at the end of October. And he was held in jail for 45 days until finally advocates were able to get his release thanks to the CARES Act. And he is serving out a 6-month criminal contempt of court sentence in his home. He's still imprisoned in his home. The United Nations has ruled that this is a human rights violation. They demanded that the Biden administration release him, compensate him, and investigate the judicial corruption that is allowing an oil company to criminally prosecute a lawyer in the United States. And that's why we all need to pay very close attention to what's happening in this case. Because when we challenge Chevron for its crimes, for violating the very ordinances that we just heard described to us, if we as a community stand together and challenge them in court, their tactic will be to criminalize and silence the lawyers, our advocates, and our communities. This is not a company that accepts the rule of law. This is not a company that respects people or the environment. And it is for that reason that this criminal enterprise must not only be stopped from polluting, but must be dismantled and broken down as a corporation if we are to be free and our people are to live in a clean environment.